Imagine launching an AWS service thinking it's free and then getting a bill at the end of the month. This happens to many beginners. So, in this video, as part of our AWS for Absolute Beginner series, let's understand how AWS pricing really works so you can use AWS confidently without worrying about unexpected cost. Now, when beginners start learning AWS, one of the biggest questions they have is how much does AWS actually cost? Is it expensive? Or do we have to pay monthly? Or do we pay only when we use it? The interesting thing about AWS is that it does not follow traditional software pricing. Instead, AWS uses something called a pay as you go pricing model. In this video, I'll explain how AWS pricing actually works, the main pricing models AWS offers, and how beginners can avoid unexpected bills. Before we understand AWS pricing, it helps to first look at how things work in the traditional IT world. In the past, if a company wants to run an application, they had to build their own infrastructure. This meant purchasing physical servers, storage systems, networking equipment, cooling units, and even renting or maintaining space in a data center. All of this required a significant upfront investment. In many cases, companies would spend millions just to purchase servers and set up the environment. But this approach had a major drawback. Suppose the application did not receive much traffic. Even if the service were mostly idle, the company had already paid for the entire infrastructure. So the resources remained underutilized, but the cost was already incurred. And this is exactly the problem the cloud computing platforms like AWS aim to solve. AWS follows a pay-as-you-go pricing model. A simple way to understand this is to think about electricity billing. When you use electricity, you pay based on how much you consume. If you use more electricity, the bill increases. If you use less electricity, the bill decreases. AWS works in a very similar way. You only pay for the resources you actually use. For example, if you run a virtual server for 2 hours, you only pay for 2 hours. If you store 10 GB of data, you only pay for 10 GB. You are not required to pay a larger upfront cost. This flexibility is one of the biggest advantages of cloud computing. In most AWS services, pricing is based on three main factors. First, we have compute. Compute refers to running applications on virtual servers. Examples include Amazon EC2, AWS Lambda, and Amazon ECS. With EC2, you launch virtual machines called instances. You pay based on the instance type, the time the instance is running. For example, if an EC2 instance costs $0.01 per hour and you can run it for 10 hours, the total cost would be $0.1. Now, another major pricing component is data storage. Examples include Amazon S3, Amazon EBS, and Amazon EFS. With S3, you store files such as images, videos, backups, and application data. AWS charges based on how much data you store. For example, if you store 100 GB of data, you pay for 100 GB of storage per month. The third pricing factor is data transfer. This refers to moving data in and out of AWS. For example, uploading data to AWS is often free, but sending data from AWS to users on the internet may have charges. This is called data transfer out. Now, before we dive deeper into AWS pricing models, it is important to understand the core philosophy behind AWS pricing. Even though AWS now offers hundreds of cloud services, the fundamental idea behind its pricing has remained the same. At the end of the day, you only pay for the resources you actually use. There are no mandatory long-term commitments, and you start or stop using resources whenever you want. So instead of purchasing infrastructure upfront, AWS follows a utility-style pricing model similar to how you pay for the electricity. This pricing approach can be understood through 4 key principles. Let's go through them one by one. The first principle is simple. You only pay for the resources you actually use. Unlike traditional infrastructure, where companies must invest in hardware and data centers upfront, AWS allows you to start and stop resources whenever you need them. For example, if you run a server for a few hours or store a certain amount of data, you are charged only for that usage. This flexibility model helps organizations avoid large upfront cost and pay only for what they consume. The second concept is about saving money by committing to usage. For certain AWS services like Amazon EC2 and Amazon RDS, you can reserve capacity in advance. These are called reserved instances. When you reserve the resources for a longer period, AWS offers significant discounts compared to on-demand pricing. Reserved instances are available in three payment options. These options mainly differ in how much you pay upfront and the discount you receive. The first option is no upfront. In this option, you don't pay anything at the beginning. Instead, you pay for the instance monthly over the duration of the reservation. Because there is no upfront payment, the discount is smaller compared to other options, but it is still cheaper than on-demand pricing. The second option is partial upfront. Here, you pay a portion of the cost at the beginning and the remaining amount is paid over time. Since you are committing some money upfront, AWS gives you a larger discount compared to the no upfront option. The third option is all upfront. In this option, you pay the entire cost of the reservation at the beginning. Because AWS receives the full payment upfront, this option provides the highest discount among all three options. This flexibility allows organizations to balance their budget and savings depending on how predictable their workloads are. Now, another important pricing principle in AWS is volume-based discounts. As your usage increases, the cost per unit decreases. For example, services like Amazon S3, Amazon EBS, and Amazon EFS often followed tiered pricing. This means the more storage you use, the lower the cost per GB becomes. So, as organizations grow and store more data, they can benefit from lower pricing over time. This model encourages businesses to scale their workloads without worrying about linear cost increases. The final principle is related to AWS economies of scale. As AWS expands its infrastructure and improves operational efficiency, the company often reduces the cost of its resources. In fact, since AWS launched in 2006, it has reduced prices many times. Because AWS operates at a massive global scale, improvements in hardware, networking, and energy efficiency, it allows the company to pass those savings back to customers. Another advantage is that AWS frequently updates its infrastructure. When newer, faster resources replace older ones, customers often benefit from improved performance without paying extra. Finally, AWS also offers custom pricing models for organizations with unique or large-scale workloads. If a company has a very high usage or specialized requirements, AWS can create tailored pricing agreements that better fits their needs. This ensures that businesses of all sizes, from startups to larger enterprises, can find a pricing structure that works for them. Now, while discussing AWS pricing, it is also important to mention the AWS free tier, which lets you try several AWS services for free. AWS actually allows beginners to experiment with many of its services for free through something called the AWS free tier. This is designed specifically for people who want to learn, build, and test applications on AWS without immediately paying for resources. So when you create a new AWS account after July 15, 2025, you can receive credits that help cover the cost of using certain services. New users can get up to $200 in credits. Typically, you receive $100 when you sign up, and you can earn additional credits as you explore and use AWS services. With the free plan, you can try AWS services for up to 6 months without any commitment. During this period, AWS provides free usage limits for several services, which allows you to practice things like launching servers, storing data, or building simple applications. Another important thing to remember is that you will not be charged automatically. You only start paying when you decide to switch to a paid plan or your usage exceeds the free credits or limits. So once you move to the paid plan, you can scale your workloads and get full access to more than 150 AWS services. So the AWS free tier is essentially a safe environment where beginners can learn AWS, build projects, and gain hands-on experience without upfront cost. Now, before launching resources, AWS provides a tool called the Pricing Calculator. This tool allows you to select resources, configure resources, and estimate monthly costs. This helps you to predict expenses before deploying your application. Now, when beginners start using AWS, sometimes they accidentally leave resources running and receive unexpected bills. Here are few simple tips to avoid that. Always stop unused EC2 instances. Delete resources you no longer need. Use AWS Cost Explorer to monitor spending. Set budgets using AWS budgets. These tools help you track and control your AWS cost. Now let's quickly summarize what we learned. AWS mainly follows a pay-as-you-go pricing model, which means you only pay for the resources you actually use. In most cases, AWS pricing is based on three main components: compute, like running servers with EC2, storage, such as storing data in Amazon S3, and data transfer, moving data in and out of AWS. We also learned that AWS offers ways to save money, such as reserved instances, which provide discounts when you commit to a longer usage. And AWS pricing can also decrease as your usage grows through volume-based discounts, and large organizations may even get custom pricing for unique workloads. Finally, beginners can start learning AWS using the AWS free tier and estimate their cost in advance using the AWS pricing calculator. That's it for this video. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care and happy learning.